Greetings, Meet the Ocean fans. This is your host, Paul North, speaking to you for the first time in 2020. The reason for this? Well, we have been rather busy with our educational outreach, visiting schools, children's hospitals, and other youth organizations across the United States. As it turns out, kids love penguins. Who would have thought? And by using our virtual reality content filmed in Antarctica and other far-flung places on our planet, we get to teach the youth. Studies have shown a nearly 40% reduction in anxiety when virtual reality is used. And you can imagine that's a pretty big deal for someone who is sick and stuck in their hospital bed. As you know, we are a nonprofit, and any donations go directly to supporting this meaningful outreach. To find out more, check out our website, meettheocean.org. Now, before we jump into the episode, some context is needed because we are talking once again about the very, very small marine mammal known as the Vaquita. It was 2 years ago that we first discussed this wee Mexican porpoise and just how close it was to being extinct. Sadly, none of those circumstances have changed. But now we get to hear more details and updates on the situation by a marine biologist who has worked with the Vaquita and knows a great deal about the creatures that inhabit the waters of Baja, California. Meet the Ocean tells these stories so that we may learn from our mistakes and do better in the future. Thank you for listening, and thank you for supporting our outreach. And now, I will let our most excellent guest introduce himself. Please enjoy.
Hi, my name is Carlos Navarro and I am from Mexico. I am a biochemist specializing in marine biology. Although I don't really care much about the chemistry part of my degree, I consider myself more of a marine biologist.
And what is your role on board?
Well, I am the undersea specialist with Lindblad Expeditions National Geographic, and that means that I am one of the naturalists, but one that goes more specifically into the ocean, and I focus more on whatever lives beneath the waves.
And on this expedition in these waters of Mexico, you are currently our only Mexican on board. So how does that feel?
I feel lonely. No, no, it's great. I am traveling with many good friends, and that's what matters.
Carlos is being humble. So let me provide some perspective. He has been working and diving in the Sea of Cortez for several decades, which has led him to becoming a premier naturalist of the region and guardian of its inhabitants. But the question is, where did it all begin?
Well, I was born in Mexico City, which is right there in the middle of the country at about 6,000 feet of altitude. And growing there, well, I didn't have the chance to do much water activities, although I first met the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico, where my grandfather was living, and we used to go visiting him almost every weekend. However, I didn't know how to swim, so my meeting of the ocean there was just restricted to the beach and kicking up sea urchins with my bare feet. That was a bad mistake. But then later, when I finished high school, I came here to this region, to the city of Guaymas, which is very close to where we are right now, to study my degree on biochemistry. And there is where I really fell in love with this part of the world. It is still one of my favorite places, certainly of my country, but also one of my favorite places on Earth. As you well said, it is a really rich body of water, surprisingly rich for its latitude, which is fairly close to the equator. Part of the Sea of Cortez is actually inside the tropics, below the Tropic of Cancer. Anyway, a great diversity of life, and I came here and pretty quickly got involved in many research projects, and I got a chance to travel throughout the entire region. And within the first 3 months of arriving to this place, I was already traveling the waters of the Sea of Cortez as an observer in a research project that monitored the dolphin mortality on sardine fishing boats, and I saw my first huge group of dolphins, my first whales, fin whales by the way, I experienced a hurricane at sea just within the first months of arriving here. So it was I was deeply immersed in this region, and I have never recovered from that impression. I'm still in love with the Sea of Cortez.
How would you describe this place for someone who's never been here before?
It is a place of contrast. The Sea of Cortez is mostly surrounded by a very dry desert, although it's not all the way. In the southern part, it's also surrounded by mangroves and more tropical forest, but most of the Sea of Cortez is surrounded by this Sonoran desert. And for many people, it is striking to see this dry environment together with a very rich sea. Sunrise and sunsets are amazing. It's really a beautiful, beautiful place. And growing up in Mexico City, well, I didn't really knew how to swim until I was 18. I learned how to swim in a swimming pool shortly before moving here to the area, so I had a late start. But after that, everything went pretty quickly, and a few months after that, I was already a certified scuba diver, and I was an avid free diver. I actually was a pretty accomplished free diver in my youth, and I spent most of my time swimming or snorkeling or free diving, and it's actually kind of a miracle that I graduated from college because I was spending so much time at sea. But yep, I love the ocean, and I'm still here diving and free diving in the Sea of Cortez.
I'd like to get into free diving a little bit more. This is an activity that I cannot say that I'm particularly good at. I've gone deep. I've had a 2-minute breath hold at my absolute prime. But I think for some people, free diving sounds terrifying. But for those who take part in free diving, for those who practice it, they normally express that it's very close to meditation.
It is actually true that it's close to meditation because it's not really about physical condition. Of course, you have to be in good shape, but it is mostly about mental control. And the more relaxed you are, the less oxygen you are going to be using, and the longer you can stay down. So I remember when I was in college, I had several of my friends who were in much better shape than I was, and they were not nearly as good at freediving as I was able to do. So it's all about being comfortable in the water, being relaxed. A lot of people find meditation very useful in order to go freediving. And during those early years, I was able to go down to possibly more than 150 feet for 3.5 minutes. And I say possible because I don't really know. I didn't have a depth meter with me at that time, but I am estimating that it was probably about 150 feet, my deepest free dive. And it is a very beautiful experience because when you are going scuba, you have all this heavy gear and you cannot move as freely. But when you are free diving, you are really free, and you can, I think it's the closest we can experience to be a sea lion or a dolphin. So it's a beautiful activity and probably my favorite sport.
And because of the lack of gear and because of the lack of bubbles that you'd be exhaling if you were scuba diving, doesn't that change the nature of your interactions with the wildlife?
Yeah, of course. Of course, many wildlife are kind of skittish and scared with those bubbles. And when you're free diving, you are more silent. You can approach them easier. And if your movements are fluid enough and you are careful enough, you can really get close to most wildlife. And that is particularly true for marine mammals. During my career, I have had the chance to swim and free dive with many whales and dolphins. And that is the way to go, because if you are wearing a scuba tank, you are probably sending a message that is not necessarily a good one. Remember that many whales, like the humpback whales, seems to be using bubbles in many ways, possibly in some cases as a way of aggression. Whenever you see competitive groups of humpback whale males chasing each other, they are always blowing bubbles. So anyway, when you are going free diving, you can really get much closer. And I have had the chance to go underwater with many different species, from blue whales to fin whales to sperm whales to killer whales, many, many different kinds. And in that regard, I feel extremely lucky because I may be the only human being ever in history that have ever had the chance to pet baby gray whales, baby blue whales, and baby sperm whales. I think that's a record that is very hard to break because especially the last two are very very difficult to approach. And gray whales, well, sometimes they get friendly in the breeding lagoons, but to get a friendly sperm whale and to get a friendly blue whale is something extremely rare. So maybe not other person have that kind of record. So it's something I am proud of.
Yeah, that is beyond impressive. I would like to hear more. What is it like to be in the water with an animal of that size? I mean, you're swimming next to some of the largest creatures on our planet.
It's a humbling experience, and it's something that I highly recommend to whoever is feeling too much of him or herself. When you think you are the greatest thing on earth, and you go swimming next to a blue whale and you realize that you are nothing, or you feel like a little sardine, it's really an impressive feeling, and it's something that is really hard to describe because unless you have experienced it yourself, you cannot really fully comprehend what I'm trying to say. And it's funny because I have had a chance to go freediving with sperm whales many times, oftentimes to film them during these trips with Lindblad or National Geographic in the years past. But I noticed that every time after I came back on board, I was kind of feeling depressed a little bit, and I feeling sad. And it took me a while to fully understand why that I was feeling that way after experiencing something so marvelous. And I think it was because it was kind of a solitude, because I knew that I was the only person on board that really know what it's like, and no one else in the entire ship can really understand what it's like to be in the water with those creatures. So it was a feeling of loneliness, I think. But don't get me wrong, it's a marvelous experience, and it's something that just is not easy to explain to other people.
Digging into the biology of sperm whales, these are creatures that are very oddly shaped, but as I understand it, they produce the loudest sound of any creature in nature. Decibel-wise, I think it's over 200 decibels, which is pretty incredible.
Well, I don't remember how loud they are, but yeah, it is theorized that they are capable of producing these super loud sounds and amplify and direct them using the different oils and greases in their heads to produce something like a sonic hit that may be able to stun or even kill their prey. Again, this is something that has been theorized. Some people have experienced that kind of thing, although I don't really believe that anyone has ever really experienced a real hard hit from a sperm whale. Anyway, as a precaution, every time I have been in the water with sperm whales, I used to go diving with a buddy, with somebody else as a safety person, staying behind me while I was filming sperm whales, just in case I was stunned or lost my consciousness. However, that never happened, and I have heard sounds made by sperm whales many times, but never really experienced such as a sonic hit. But again, it is a possibility because maybe it is believed that sperm whales can do that because they have found sperm whales with injured jaws, completely useless lower jaws, and still had a full stomachs. So they can feed without using their mouth. I mean, their jaw. So yeah, it's possible, but I have never experienced that. On that regard, it is also very impressive to me that the big male sperm whales, they have a signature sound. They are constantly advertising their presence by making a very distinctive sound that has been described as an iron jail door being slammed with great strength. And it is a perfect description because it really sounds metallic, and it's a very, very impressive thing to experience when you are in the water and then you see this dark shape approaching you and this super loud jail door slamming coming to you. It's something very, very unique.
Often when sperm whales are described, it's almost uniform that we talk about their diet as being squid. Squid, squid, squid. They dive deep. They find the squid. That's where the squid live. That's what they're eating. But you and I had a conversation that proposed that their diet is far more varied than just squid.
Yeah, it is believed that sperm whales only feed on squid, and it is possibly true for most of their diet. However, they can also capture a great variety of prey. In the waters around Iceland, it is believed that male sperm whales feed mostly on sharks, deep-water sharks. And there are evidences found on the stomachs of hunted or dead sperm whales showing a great number of prey items, from sea cucumbers and sea stars and other bottom invertebrates to many kinds of fish. And there are a few records of harbor seals or other kinds of seals also in the stomach. And and there are many stories about sperm whales eating people. However, most of those are possibly not true. However, Dr. Hal Whitehead from Canada, who is considered to be maybe the world's authority on sperm whales, on a personal email, he told me of a real instance of a human corpse found in the stomach of a male sperm whale. Coming from other people, I may not be able to believe it, but coming from him, I believe it. And if you think about it, a person is much smaller than many of the prey that sperm whales are known to eat. A giant squid is way bigger than a human corpse, so I don't see why not.
And of course, that human survived because that's what happened in Pinocchio, right?
Yeah, of course. Although Pinocchio was more buoyant, he was made out of wood, so he floated easily. But sperm whales are very interesting. They have the biggest brain on this planet. The male sperm whale has the biggest brain known on Earth. And there is something, you can tell that there is a presence behind that eye that is looking at you in the water. I have been freediving with sperm whales many times, and I have felt how they are curious, how they are interested about me. I have had baby sperm whales rolling in front of me while ecolocating, and I have felt like a little toy for those guys that are bored in the surface waiting for mom to come back from the depths. There is a mind. There is someone analyzing the diver right there.
Most of these marine mammals that you are interacting with are here in Baja, California. But can you describe why they are able to be here? Such large creatures have, a lot of caloric needs. They need a dense amount of food. So what's going on in the waters of the Sea of Cortez that allows them to exist here?
Well, the Sea of Cortez is a very unique body of water for its latitude. The location, the shape, and the bottom profile contribute for a number of oceanographic processes that make this a very rich part of the ocean. For example, the Sea of Cortez have a series of basins, each one deeper than the one before, and together with a really high, really big tidal range in the northern part, makes for really strong upwellings in the middle part, but also the prevailing winds that reverse direction in the winter and the summer. They also create areas with upwellings on both shores of the Sea of Cortez at different times of the year. So it's a very, very rich part of the ocean. And that creates a lot of food for many cetaceans. There are records of more than 30 different species of cetaceans in the waters around Baja California. Not all of them are frequent or common, but that's a very large number. That's about 1 of every 3 cetaceans in the planet. And again, if you consider the relative low latitude of this place, that's pretty amazing. Many cetaceans are residents. Some of them never leave the Sea of Cortez. Some of them come here temporarily during the summer or the winter. Some of them come here just to breed, that's the case of the gray whale or the humpback whale. But many individuals, even of those species that only come to breed, stay for several months or even the entire year during the Sea of Cortez. Even the largest of the whales, the blue whale, come here to feed. There are areas like the Loreto Bay National Park that we traveled through a few days ago, have really huge concentrations of different species of krill during the winter and spring. So many whales come and feed. Some just come to reproduce. Some stay year-round. So it's a very dynamic place.
Well, I don't think we can talk about Baja California and cetaceans without pretty much the most endangered among them, which is the vaquita. Meet the Ocean did an episode about the vaquita several years ago at this point. But you, Carlos, have had a pretty intense career with vaquitas. So I'd love to hear not only how that got started, but then bringing us to the modern day and where things are at with the vaquita right now.
Yeah, the vaquita is endemic to the northernmost part of the Sea of Cortez, meaning that it's only found in that corner between the mainland of Mexico and the peninsula of Baja California, pretty much in the Colorado River Delta. That's the only place on Earth where vaquitas live. And vaquita is a porpoise. It's the only porpoise in the waters of the Sea of Cortez. And as you well said, it is now the most endangered cetacean on the planet. And there is a series of circumstances that have made the vaquita that way. Years ago when I came to the Sea of Cortez, I pretty quickly got involved with a research project studying the vaquita. And when that project started, it was only 3 years after the very first fresh specimens were recovered by scientists. Only 3 years after the scientific world knew how a vaquita looked like. Because, as you may remember, the vaquita was described to science in 1958, but it was only after a couple of bleached skulls that were found on the beach. It was not until 1985 when those first specimens were retrieved by Alejandro Robles. And then this group of researchers and students in the same place where I was where I was studying my degree on biochemistry got involved, and I was deeply immersed in those studies. And we were basically traveling to the areas in the upper Gulf where the vaquitas were being killed by accident on a number of fishing nets. No one has ever killed a vaquita on purpose. There is no commercial use for the vaquita, but the vaquita is very small. It is actually the smallest cetacean in the planet. And it is about the same size as an average totuaba. Totuaba is also an endemic, but it's a fish. It's a fish that is used to make yearly migrations to the same area where the vaquita lives for reproduction. And totuaba used to be the most appreciated of the marine fishes in the area, up to the point that in those years, commercial fishermen threw any snapper or any grouper away. They were only looking for totuabas. But then in the 1910s, 1920s, the growing Chinese community in Southern California, in northern Baja California, they realized that the dry swim bladder of this fish, the totuaba, was very similar to the dry swim bladder of a fish they used back home to make a soup that is called cincao. So they began buying those dry swim bladders, and a migration of commercial fishermen from Guaymas, from Santa Rosalia, started to make their way every winter to that region to fish for the totuaba. And they went fishing big time. They utilized all kinds of fishing gear and fishing nets and even dynamite in order to capture the totuaba. And they fished for this fish so heavily that the totuaba became the very first marine fish in the world to be declared endangered in the 1970s. But anyway, that heavy fishing took a toll on the vaquita as well, because, as I said, vaquitas are similarly sized as the totuaba. They were living in the same areas where all this fishing was going on. And a big number of vaquitas were killed in these activities. Again, not on purpose. No one really had a commercial use for the vaquita. But up to this point, whenever a fisherman captured a vaquita by accident, they just threw it back into the ocean. But we started retrieving those dead vaquitas from fishermen in order to do all kinds of studies. Again, this is only 3 years after we knew about which color the vaquita is. So we knew next to nothing about the species. So all these specimens that we retrieved were very helpful because we did necropsies, we looked for the stomach contents, we knew what the vaquita was eating, we analyzed the blubber or the internal organs for pesticides and heavy metals. All kinds of studies were made with those vaquita specimens. And I was the one that spent most of the time in the field among this group of researchers. I think that made me one of the people that collected most specimens of vaquitas than anybody else. Anyway, very sad story, the vaquita, because even though the species received official protection in the 1990s when the Upper Gulf of California Biosphere Reserve was created by the Mexican government, illegal fishing continues, and vaquitas are still dying every year. And nowadays, things got worse because with the increasing economy of China, more and more people afford to buy this illegal product, the dried totoaba swim bladder, and illegal fishing for the totoaba continues and increased big time. Nowadays, the price for a single dry swim bladder of the totoaba is about $17,000, one single dry swim bladder. And with that kind of money involved, mafias made their way into this illegal trade, and now they control the whole thing. So it is a very difficult situation, because even though the Mexican government and the Mexican Navy are trying to fight and put a stop to this activity, illegal fishing continues, and vaquitas also continue to die in that fishery. The vaquita has been facing a steady decline, and the last population survey that was made just 3 months ago in January 2019 estimated between only 10 and 23 vaquitas left on Earth. That is a very, very low number, especially if you consider that this is a mammal. Mammals do not reproduce that quickly as fish do. So vaquita probably reached already a point of no return. So even if no more vaquitas die in illegal nets from now, even if that could be accomplished, the population is probably already too low to recover. And this is the official version of the story. However, it is a basic biological principle that whenever a species evolves into a new endemic species, endemic to a very small area, a restricted, limited place, it is because the environmental conditions in that particular spot are different than the rest. And I believe that the lack of fresh water from the Colorado River is now playing a more important role in the diminishing of the vaquita. The killing of vaquita in fishing activities is the spear point, putting an end on the last individuals. But I believe that a deeper cause for the diminishing of the vaquita is the lack of fresh water. The whole region used to be completely brackish. The salt content of the water was lower than the rest of the Sea of Cortez. Remember that the Colorado River used to be a huge river flowing free into this region. The Colorado carried a much heavier sediment load than the Mississippi, which is a larger river. So a lot of nutrients, a lot of organic matter and minerals arrived to this area, fertilizing the waters. But also the salinity was much lower. Now, starting in 1921, when the first water diversions commenced in the Colorado River, less and less water began arriving here. According to the International Water Treaty signed up between Mexico and the United States in 1948, the United States keeps 90% of that water. Mexico only gets 10% in a good year, not always the case. And Mexico utilizes about 90% of that 10%. So, in the best case, only about 1% of the flow, of the freshwater flow of the Colorado reaches the Sea of Cortez. As a result, and if you remember that the whole area is very shallow and is surrounded by the Sonoran Desert, the Altar Desert, the evaporation levels are very high, and as a result, the entire region, which used to be brackish, is now hypersaline. A most important environmental parameter like salinity totally changed 180 degrees. So I don't think it is realistic or to think that that is not affecting an endemic species like the vaquita, or maybe the vaquita's prey, we don't know. Again, the diversion of water from the Colorado started long before the vaquita was even discovered by science, so we don't really know how was the situation before. But again, you don't need a lot of data to realize that this is an issue. So that may be the real deep reason of why the vaquita is going extinct. The illegal fishery is just putting an end to the last individuals, but the total destruction of that habitat is probably playing a more important role.
Well, I guess I'll say wow. That was a lot of very detailed information and necessary to understand what's actually happening here. It's hard to imagine that a culture an ocean away on another continent can be responsible for the final extinction of a species. But I also think to turn awareness towards how rivers and oceans interact is a very key feature in this struggle. Like you said, not only for the Vaquita, but probably for a lot of the benthic creatures on the bottom and what they're having to deal with that new increase in salinity.
And of course, we cannot take all that water away because that water is now utilized in several cities. Many cities in the United States and northern Mexico depend on that water. It is not realistic that we're going to take the water away from people. That's not going to happen. So it is pretty much, I think that it is pretty much certain that the Vaquita may go extinct imminently. Not by the time your grandchildren get married. No, the Vaquita is going to go extinct maybe next year, maybe this year. So it is going to be very sad. To me, it's going to be a very sad moment. But let's remember that even though we have heard a lot about whaling and the Japanese killing whales and all that, whaling has never really put an end to a species. We have lost only one cetacean so far, the Chinese river dolphin, the Baja, which was the first cetacean to go extinct a few years ago. Vaquita is going to be the second. But again, there is very little we can do. But maybe there is a lesson there. We cannot take the water out of cities, but maybe we can learn how to use water more efficiently, more wisely. A lot of that water is actually being used for recreational uses. Part of that water is utilized to irrigate more than 200 golf courses in Phoenix, Arizona, in the desert. It is used to have huge fountains in Las Vegas, artificial lakes in Las Vegas, and also to irrigate a lot of agricultural fields in the Imperial and the Mexicali valleys with agricultural fields that are growing a lot of crops that needs a lot of water. So maybe we should learn that and try to use that precious water in raising crops that require less water. Maybe there is a chance to release a little bit more of that into the environment. But again, the Colorado is gone for practical purposes in the Sea of Cortez, and it is not realistic that we're going to get that water back.
Well, this brings up a larger issue that sometimes keeps me up at night, and that is humans' disconnection with the natural world. I mean, what you and I do is go underwater, record the best of what we can find, and then come up to the surface, edit it in a way that creates a story so that people can absorb and better know what is happening in our oceans. But I think largely, to the average person who is just trying to work, feed their family, get by, the idea of saving the natural world, preserving the natural world, or even interacting with the natural world seems somewhat out of reach. And I personally feel that until we fix that relationship, until people start to understand that they are a part of this, that they are, in fact, animals that require nourishment, hydration, and all those things, that it'll be more difficult to sort of win these battles of what are we doing with our resources. Because as you know, and as anyone who's paying attention knows, that this is a system that is intertwined. So if you shut off the water valve in one place, it's definitely going to affect something downriver, quite literally, like we're speaking of here.
Yeah, it's very true, and these kind of subjects are hard to talk about because people don't really like to be sad. And I'm afraid the Vaquita story is a sad one, but it is also true, and I am convinced that it is important to talk about these kind of things because we cannot be like like the ostrich that buries his head in the ground and tries not to look around. Nobody likes to talk about sad things. Nobody wants to see all the problems. But if we don't realize, we don't acknowledge those problems, those issues, we are not going to work to solve them. The first step to solve a problem is to acknowledge that there is a problem. If we don't really want to see it, we will never act towards a solution. So the vaquita is probably going to go extinct, but let's have the vaquita as an example, and let's try to mend and try to work to... Let's try to use the vaquita as an example so we can... Evitar? How do you say evitar? Maybe we can save other species using the vaquita as example.
Yeah, we can do better, certainly. And I thank you. There is no need to apologize for bringing the truth to the microphone. That's what we're trying to do here with our podcast and our educational outreach. I very much feel that storytelling, like we have taken part in today, is one of the best ways to get people's attention. A headline, a newspaper article is great information, but it's easily ignored. I think we as humans absorb these stories a little bit more fully than we do other information. So I certainly thank you for sharing your perspective and the information that you have.
Thank you, Paul. And once again, to all your audience, let's remember what Gandhi said in India, that never underestimate the power of one. You listening to this podcast, if you think that you cannot do anything, that you are just one person, that you are not a powerful person, think again, because you can influence people around you. You can make a difference. Whatever you can do, but do it. Don't be a passive observer. Thank you very much.
Meet the Ocean is produced by Paul North and Andrew Gettings, with sound design by Kelsey Anderson. Special thanks to naturalist Carlos Navarro for sharing his love and perspective on the life within the waters of Baja, California. Make sure to check out his photography on Instagram at Carlos Navarro Photos. We are a listener-supported nonprofit. You can find more podcasts, underwater creatures, and ways to donate to our educational outreach on our website, meettheocean.org. Subscribe to our podcast to never miss an episode, and please rate and review Meet the Ocean on Apple Podcasts or on whatever platform you choose to listen. Until next time, may the saltwater be with you.